We're live. Welcome. Very, very tempting to look on your face while I was staring at the countdown telling me that I was going to go live. But here we are. Thanks everyone for joining, all 46, 47 of you. I was expecting 10 or 11, so really chuffed that you're all here to hear me talk about trade search and kind of my strategies and my thoughts on what that's going to be in the future. So yes, like I mentioned, I'm going to be talking on future-proofing your paid search. I'm going to raise some points which a few of you might have heard of maybe even 3 years ago, which are now best practice now, and also my thoughts on a couple of Google's various changes which they've been introducing kind of over the past 6 months to a year, which I'm sure those who work in PPC are very fully aware of. For example, the BMN keyword match type change, search query data disappearing, automation, consolidation, and so on. So this is me. I'm Greg. I'm a senior paid media strategist at a Nottingham-based in the UK digital marketing agency called Impression. I've been working in PPC for over 3.5 years now, and I've been specializing in search, display, video, and paid strategy. I'm a manager in that team, which has been recently named Best Large PPC Agency in Europe, PPC Agency of the Year, Biddable Team of the Year 2 years in a row as of yesterday, according to various award outlets, but none of them had an in-person ceremony, so who really cares at that point? And a fun fact about me is that I love pina coladas and getting caught in a good old account restructure. So please, throughout this presentation, feel free to ask questions, which I'll answer at the end. By the end of this session, I'm hoping that you guys will get enough out of this that you'll go away and implement some of the changes and theories which I've been talking about in your own kind of PPC accounts. If any of you guys do implement any of this and see results, be it good or bad, I'd love to hear from you. So please find me on Twitter there. It's Greg PPC, not to be confused with PPC Greg. LinkedIn, or if you want to be really invasive, just email my work email address, which is there. And I'd love to kind of hear if any of you implement some of these changes and how that goes for you as well. Cool. So what will I be talking about today? First of all, I'll be talking about what's changed and what's changing within Google Ads. There's been obviously a huge amount changing over the last year, and a lot of us don't really know exactly what to do with it, and Google's not giving us a lot of information to go on. We're kind of having to trust Google a lot more rather than our own kind of PPC know-how. So I'm going to be talking about what that is and how we react to that and how we maintain some sort of level of control. And for those of you who are worried, how us PPC managers keep our jobs within that. Next, I'm going to be talking about how we structure our search campaigns in 2021 and going into the future. And then I'll be talking about how to optimize in my newly structured search campaigns and within a smart structure. It's not all just giving Google the data, clicking a button, and then effing off and making a tea. There is still a lot that we can do as PPC managers, and we'll be focusing on the context of how we manage accounts within the context of future-proofing our paid search. Cool. So without further ado, look at what's changed and what's changing. So what's happening? Or help, I can't see my search queries. I'm sure many of you are aware that as of September, Google introduced changes that you could not see all of click data in your search query reports. So this means that only around 80% of click searches are visible in your search term reports, and the amount of impressions is even less than that. This is obviously a bit of a concern for kind of old school PPC, where search query audits is generally a pretty important aspect of PPC management, both in terms of negative keyword management to ensure that our budget is being allocated as effectively to the right keywords as possible, but also around keyword mining. If we don't know what is converting, which we're not already targeting, then how do we grow the account? Pretty worrying. And as you can see there in this shot here, this is the search term report of an account that I'm working on. And yes, only around 80% of those clicks are visible. So 17,000 out of 21,000. And then the impression data is only around a third of that. So pretty concerning. So what do we do there? We need to stop focusing and relying on those small variances in search terms to drive splitting strategy. If something is converting enough that it's worth adding as a keyword, it's going to appear in the 80%. That 20% of keywords which are converting are very likely very close variants, misspellings, plurals, or something which is so niche and so long tail that it's unlikely to be searched again. So targeting that as a specific keyword both reduces the amount of data density you've got on your account, as well as making efficient management a lot less efficient and a lot more difficult to look at if you've got 10,000 converted once 4 years ago. So what we need to do is we need to use that 80% to guide our strategy, focusing on the context that we see from that, the audiences and the keyword themes to drive the growth. If we understand our audience, then our following keywords should be relevant. So yes, we can only see 80% of clicks, but if we understand our audience and the keyword themes and the search term themes that we're getting from that 80%, then we should know exactly what we should be targeting and who we should be targeting to.
If you're still worried about negative keyword management and you're worried about your budget not being allocated
efficiently because you can't see your search query data, it's the same sort of thing. If something is appearing enough that it's worth adding as a negative, then it will still appear in those 80% of clicks in the search term report. If something has been clicked on and it is wasting your budget, then again, it could be something which is very long tail, won't be searched again. And if it is searched again, then you'll likely see it in your search term reports. So use that 80% to drive your growth in terms of figuring out the context of the keyword themes and the audiences that you want to target to. And if anything is still irrelevant, then it will still appear for now. That brings me on to match types. I'm sure everyone has been pulling their hair out or at least scratching their head about keyword match types over the last, and I was going to say 6 months, but I want to say the last 2 years. So let's start with phrase and exact keyword match types. Exact match is no longer exact match, and phrase match is no longer phrase match. So over the past couple of years, Google have brought in close variants, which were previously just plurals and slight misspellings of words. However, now it can be almost synonyms and keywords which are kind of almost more broad than exact and phrase nowadays. So what does this mean? This means that splitting campaigns into campaign and ad groups by match type will make it much more difficult as they're so similar in their intent anyway. Previously, best practice in paid search was to split your campaigns by, for example, an exact campaign and then a broad match or phrase match campaign with the exact same keywords but of a different match type. As the variance between them becomes less and less, splitting them out in this way results in a lot less data density and it makes the account a lot more inefficient to use. So what we want to do is we want to kind of consider those within the same ad group. And I'll go into that a little bit later when I talk about structuring the account. However, in addition to that, kind of looking into the future, we do need to prepare for keyword match types to become more kind of irrelevant and more interchangeable in their similarity or irrelevant entirely, which is a theory of mine for the future. So if you look at this screen grab here, you can see that around 15-20% of the search terms in this account are actually close variants of exact and phrase. So very, very important to consider and not kind of discount. So that brings me on to the DMM keyword match type. As I'm sure everyone who works in PPC is aware, by July 2021, you won't be able to create broad match modified keywords anymore. Broad match modified being a classic staple of PPC. So a pretty worrying change. So what this means basically is that since February 2021, phrase match keywords have started incorporating elements of DMM keywords, which means that the new matching type behavior will consider word order when relevant to the meaning. So in the past, phrase match was kind of the search terms which could appear for phrase match had to be in that keyword in that exact order. So for example, the example which Google gives us, is moving services London to Manchester. Previously, phrase match could incorporate affordable and then moving services London to Manchester, or London corporate moving services. And it was just that. whereas BMM would consider those same keywords but in a different order. So London corporate moving services to Manchester, and also moving services Manchester to London, which is obviously irrelevant to the keyword. What the change is happening is that phrase match will become slightly more broad, and obviously broad match modified will become no longer relevant. And phrase match will incorporate these elements of BMM where it's the same context of the keyword. So the example that Google gives here, which is different, is the phrase moving services London to Manchester can also incorporate the search term London corporate moving services to Manchester. Theoretically the same intent, but it won't include moving services Manchester to London, which BMM previously would. The new phrase match still won't. But yeah, Google says that it won't reverse the order of keywords, but they also added new keywords in. So it's going to be a little bit iffy to start with, but generally phrase match is going to become kind of a lot safer, but with also a semi-broad element attached to it. Cool. So what does that mean for other variances of BMM keywords? So keywords that only partially use the plus notation, which is synonymous with BMM. So they will start to act like all phrase keywords kind of immediately. So if you had a keyword such as plus moving services, that would act as moving services in the phrase match. The process of BMM keywords moving into phrase apparently will be complete by the end of April 2021. So you've got a day. You'll still be able to create BMMs until July 2021. So BMMs that are live now will have started acting already like the new phrase match keyword already. So you won't get, for example, Manchester to London instead of London to Manchester. So at the moment, if you have BMM and phrase match keywords, they're likely duplicates of each other, which can be a problem as it can limit data density in a campaign. So what do we need to do in the short term? I would advise that we don't change BMMs to phrase match immediately, which I'm sure some of you might disagree with. And the reason for this is that BMMs will automatically converge into phrase match keywords. If you were to change your BMM keyword into phrase match yourself manually, then all the data that you've received on that keyword will be wiped because you're editing the keyword itself. So over time, Google will start to bring out tools, and you'll probably see these in your recommendations tab, where it will tell you to transition BMM keyword to phrase match. The actual transition itself has already started and is more or less complete behind the scenes, but Google will bring these recommendations out just to change the notation of it. I'm sure a lot of you have already seen that Google has been recommending you to change your BMM keywords into broad and modified keywords. And again, I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So again, in the meantime, what do we do? I would advise not changing your keywords completely. If you really want to add phrase match, create new keywords rather than editing your normal BMM keywords. And then Google will probably recommend further down the line, instead of changing your BMM keywords to phrase, it will advise that you just pause your BMM keywords so as to reduce the amount of duplication in your account. But in the meantime, look at your phrase and BMM keyword performance over the last 6 months, and you'll start to see that BMM is kind of decreasing and phrase match is picking up some of the terms lost by the BMM keyword over time. So here's an example, this being the start of May, BMM clicks declining and phrase match clicks increasing. I imagine kind of in a couple of months, this will be essentially on the floor until you change it to phrase match, and any existing phrase match keywords you have will continue. If you don't have any phrase match keywords, then your BMM is probably consistent, but again, that would automatically change to phrase match behind the scenes without you having to do anything. Cool. So we still need to be hot on our negatives with this. Google do say that the context will still be the same, but I'm sure there are so many niches within kind of every single product that's ever existed that it must be impossible for them to know them kind of at least immediately. So do be hot on your negatives, but kind of in the short term to future-proof yourself for these changes, I would advise not panicking and just continuing with the work that you're doing. so as not to lose the data that you've gained, and then the changes have already been made kind of behind the scenes, and Google will help you change that notation in the future. Cool, so that brings me on to the broad and modified keyword, whereas I like to call them bums. This is a semi-ignored match type, and anyone who works in BBC knows that maybe 6 months ago, a year ago, adding bums into your account was generally very, very bad practice, as the keyword match type was incredibly broad and could bring in terms which perhaps not relevant to your account at all. However, with the integration from BMM into phrase, we're probably going to see a loss of account growth opportunity through expanding into broad keywords. So bums is how we deal with this. Bums and the new phrase match are a good way to grow your account. And even now, while BMM still technically exists, I would highly recommend putting this into your account. However, only in particular circumstances, strategies, and structures. So recently, in the last 6 months, improvements in Google's algorithms means that it's much better at capturing the right intent for these keywords and converting users at a similar CPA. Whereas in the past, it was so broad that we kind of wouldn't even consider it, to be honest. I'm going to put live a poll now because this has only sort of been a good best practice for about 6 months now. And I'm keen to see if anyone has actually used these. So keep your eye out on the chat for a poll, and let me know kind of if you've had experience with bums and kind of if you haven't used them, and perhaps if you haven't used them, a question at the end could be you explaining why you haven't used them. So I mentioned only use in the right context. So use these in search campaigns, but only if you're using a performance-based bidding strategy, such as target CPA, max conversions, target ROAS, and maximum conversion value. So I've just published that poll. Let me know your experience with bums, and if anyone starts to use the notation bums to their clients or their colleagues, please let me know because I want it to catch on. Cool. Going away from keywords, we need to focus on audiences. So I was talking about contextual targeting when we're looking at the search query reports because we can't see all the information that we have. So we need to understand our audience contextually, as well as using that data available to us in the UI. So using previously created first-party audiences, we can determine through the Audience Insights tab in Google the best third-party audiences to integrate. So that tells us who's likely to convert, who's likely to be looking for more information about the product, and then we can target and expand our keywords based on the context of the audiences that we see. And we can also integrate those audiences into our search campaigns. And any of you who are doing more outbound top of the funnel activity, then this is a really good method to kind of expand that. But I'm talking about paid search today, so kind of we'll leave that for another day. So I believe this is very important for future-proofing your strategy, as because keywords become more vague, which they are, this could prove vital in knowing the context of who to target. And perhaps maybe in a year or two, I wouldn't be surprised if keywords didn't even exist anymore, and we're actually targeting audiences in the same way as you might in a display or a YouTube or a social campaign itself. So get on the bandwagon now, start using audiences, and if something drastic happens in 2 years, thank me later. Cool. Responsive search ads. I say what's happened. These guys have been around for a while. However, we're probably looking at the death of the expanded text ad pretty soon, to be honest. So RSAs are already kind of the primary method of ads and split testing. And kind of as Google starts to give us less data, split testing ads can become a lot harder and kind of a lot less time efficient. So by providing the information to Google, they will split test the ads themselves, and generally they will converge towards the ad copy which is the best performing for your account. So for example, the client on the right is a boiler installer. You can see that 2 of the headlines I provided Google, so manufactured in the UK versus find a local heating engineer. I would think anecdotally that find a local heating engineer would be more relevant to a lot searching about boiler installation, and Google has split tested that and seen that, and it does prioritize those ads. So we're still putting the human emotion and the creativity in the ad copy that we provide, but we're handing over the reins to Google a little bit to ensure that to ensure that when expanded text ads die, we're not kind of on the back foot. We're already embracing this straight away, but we've also got the control of creating our own ads. And then finally, before I get into the structuring your search for success, I apologize if I'm lagging. This is being quite laggy for me, but you know, what can we do? Is automation. So everyone knows automation is huge, and it's going to be huge. It already is huge. It's going to be even more huge. So please work with it, not against it, but don't completely submit to it. So I've seen a lot of accounts where people are still trying to do manual bidding, still trying to bring out keywords into very granular single keyword ad groups, or SCAGs as they used to be called. Just don't. It's becoming so hard to do that, and Google's algorithms are so strong that kind of automation is the way forward. So, you know, use the information you've got and your audiences to guide a smart bidding strategy yourself. So don't just whack a random one and let Google do the work. We still have to know the context of the audience, of the context of the keyword category, of the product, of the client or yourself, your KPIs, and apply that kind of smart bidding strategy to each area in your account to achieve the best results. And then the time that we would have spent on manual bid adjustments, both in terms of the actual keyword, but also things like device, demographic, location, time of day, day of week, blah, blah, blah. That time which we're saving should be used on improving the accounts through the context which I've spoken about. So, you know, finding the right audiences, expanding into new areas, new channels to drive more volume for our strategy. If we know that our audiences are working well, then we might want to do top of funnel, which will increase the amount of branded activity that we then get through the account. And that branded activity is going to perform really well because we've got our campaigns automated. So I'll talk about that more now, but just kind of as a small caveat, automation is key. If you're still fighting against it, you're fighting a losing battle, and it's not going to happen for you, I'm afraid. Cool. So how do we structure our search for success? I think the slide's taking a little while to load, but there we go. Cool. So how do we structure search? We structure search to be data first. I like to build my search campaigns with three pillars, essentially. I use a consolidated campaign structure. So this is campaigns segmented by category. So like product category, product KPI, for example, and allowing budget to be, that allows budget to be applied on a priority basis and individual KPIs attached to each area, which I was mentioned kind of in the previous slide. I want our ad groups to be split by keyword context, not match type. Please don't split your ad groups by match type anymore. And this will improve kind of the ad relevance and the click-through rate, and we should be focusing on the intent of the keyword rather than the keyword itself. If two keywords have the same intent, they go into the same landing page, whack them in the same ad group. There's no reason to split them out. And then finally, layering appropriate audience dimensions, both first party and third party, to improve CPA and ROI, as Google will take at least first party audiences into consideration when you're using your smart bidding strategies. So consolidating our campaigns. On the left is what you might have been using in the past. You know, your campaigns on manual bidding, which were split out by match type, being an exact phrase. You might have had a mobile campaign. You might have had a RLSA campaign. Now, I propose that we bring everything into one area, and with the right smart bidding strategy, Google will automatically bid more aggressively towards the users that we'd want to be bidding more aggressively to. If you're a B2B client, then you don't need to add, you know, midnight to 7 a.m. as a negative bid modifier. Google would learn that those times of the day and the weekend, for example, are not going to be strong performing times for you, and it will automatically dampen the bids throughout those periods. But the bids that are in those periods will probably perform better than if you just excluded them completely, which we might have done in the past. Cool. So we've got our campaigns which are consolidated, and we are splitting them by KPIs. So instead of splitting them by match types, we want to split them in like product category so that we can allocate budget to each area. So for example, if they have different KPIs, and we're still sending users to the most relevant landing page as possible without splitting them out too much. So for example, in my account here, I've got a campaign for tractors, which has a different cost of sale to my campaign for combine harvesters. They're different enough, so I'll split them into different campaigns, easy. Within those ad groups, we've got different types of that keyword category. So big tractors, small tractors, different enough in intent that they need to be split out, but still within the same category. And the same for my combine harvesters campaign, where we've got seasonal and evergreen combine harvesters. Is it obvious that I know nothing about combine harvesters? But that's not relevant. Cool. So you might be asking, how do I maintain control in my new campaign that I've structured to be future friendly? So we maintain control by setting our own KPIs and grouping the keywords together on our own discretion. So we know the intent of the keyword and we know the theme of the keyword better than Google probably will, especially if you're it's your business and your product that you're doing. If something's different enough to be on its own or its own ad group, then make it so. I'm not telling you to group everything together. Kind of use your common sense, use the context of the account and the keyword and group things via that way. Embrace your close variants. If something comes in that's a plural or a misspelling and it still converts and it's still relevant, leave it. People don't search like they used to. I'm pretty sure there's that classic statistic that Google give where something like 20% of searches every single day are brand new to kind of the world and they've never been searched before, which is insane. And that goes back to the search query data, that goes back to close variants, it goes back to bringing your match types together. People are searching differently. Voice search is going to be a big thing. Let's make sure that we've got our groups and our campaigns grouped by theme rather than very small variances, so that when these changes do happen, we're ready for them. If something's not relevant and appears enough to show in search query data, we'll still negative it though, easy. And consolidation and smart bidding will likely move towards any demographic device time changes that we'd want to make, but it does make it more profitable to do so at the same time. So if you really want to maintain control and you really don't want to bid kind of on a particular device or at the weekend, then you can still add a 100% negative multiplier and Google will ignore it. If you add a minus 50% modifier, it won't do anything. Only minus 100% will work to exclude it. But like I said, there's your control if you really want it, but I would advise that you kind of let Google do the work and it will figure out the context soon enough. Cool. And then the third thing I mentioned in my structured campaigns is audience-centric targeting. I've spoken about the context so much, but we want to identify our target audiences using previously created first-party audiences, measuring the behavior of the third-party audiences, and then integrating them into the account using similar audiences to look like, and just giving Google as much data as possible in a smallest area as possible, so that it has more factors to optimize towards each particular user and each particular search. So why do we want to group everything consolidated? Why do we want to keep everything by ad group theme, other than kind of making it easier and avoiding variances? We want to do this because of smart bidding. So Google's machine learning algorithm is awesome. Maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, probably actually, it might not have been so good. But Google's smart bidding algorithm is, as it says on the tin, really smart. It takes into consideration thousands of factors, be it kind of a few which I've put here. So time of day, location, device, audience lists, operating system, the app you're on, the browser you're using, the language, the query, the search partner, the creative. So many of these things which previously we were adding a 10% modifier on mobile. Great. That doesn't mean that every single user on mobile is 10% more likely to convert. It's different for each individual user. The context is so important, and Google Smart Bidding does that. And when we've got a campaign which is structured and it's consolidated rather than split out by exact match and broad match, and we've got all of those in the same area, then Google has more information in each area and it has more factors for each keyword, so that every time a user bids, every time a user searches a query, instead of splitting your data by 2 for example, with match type, and that's just one split. You've got it all in, and you've got double the amount of data. You get your audience lists in, all your devices in, you've got triple, quadruple, and so on. I think there's over 100,000 characteristics, factors that Google can take into consideration with every single bid. So structure your campaign so that it's consolidated, it's data dense. If you take one thing away from this presentation, it's data density is the key and what we need for the future. And Google will work with you, and you'll be laughing, you'll be winning. Cool. So when I talk about smart bidding, there are a number of smart bidding strategies that we can, of course, use. There are both visibility strategies, so maximize clicks, so achieve as many clicks within a given budget as possible. These are good for campaigns where you're limited by budget, because you'll probably see a much lower cost per click. But they don't work particularly well in uncapped budgets unless you specify a maximum cost per click, which is very important. And the same for target impression share, where you achieve a certain impression share on the page, so visibility and kind of whereabout. Good for brand visibility, but again, make sure you've got kind of a cost per click limit. However, what this whole presentation is about is working with these strategies, your performance-based strategies. So this is where Google starts to take those factors in your consolidated campaigns into effect much more. So we've got our classic target CPA and target ROAS, where we input a certain KPI. Google will use these are good for campaigns which are not limited by budget. I go into some caveats later, but don't be too ambitious with these. Don't say that you want a £1 cost per acquisition, because it's not going to happen. Be realistic. Google now calls target ROAS value-based bidding. So again, they're putting a lot more work into this. So if you embrace it now, then kind of you're setting yourself up for the future and to do. And then the kind of the more aggressive version, which is maximize conversions or maximize conversion value. So achieve as many conversions or as much value within a given budget as possible. These are really, really powerful in limited by budget campaigns. If you're limited by budget, then you'll probably see CPAs go down quite a lot, because it will go after the low-hanging fruit a little bit more. And then if you move to a higher budget, which I'll talk about in a second, you're probably going to want to move to the former. So what does our structured search campaign for future-proofing look like in reality? So this is an example campaign structure of my very famous tractor business that I've made up during the course of this presentation. In our account, we've got our brand campaign, standard. We've got our target impression share on there. We've got our ad group, which has keywords of all three match types in. So farmyard, vehicle, direct, exact, phrase, and broad. Again, made up that name. We've got our RSAs attached to it. We've got our ETAs attached to it in the short term, but they're going to go. And they're all linking to the home page. On the other hand, we've got a non-brand campaign. So we've got our tractors campaign. That tractors campaign has a certain KPI, so we want to put target CPA on it. We've then got ad groups, which are split by theme. So big tractors, which incorporates both match types, as well as kind of variances within the same intent. So big tractors, huge tractors. Let's say they're the same, because I don't know anything about tractors. But if they are, then we put them in the same ad group and they go to the same landing page. If it's going to the same landing page, should probably be in the same ad group. Small tractors, however, very different. So small tractors, tiny tractors, all the match types, all in one ad group, all going to the same landing page, all on target CPA. And that is a very kind of top level view of what an example campaign structure would look like. In reality, you probably have one brand campaign and maybe 5 non-brand campaigns, maybe 15 or 20, but we don't want like 70 campaigns, which we might have had in the past. We want to get everything dense and consolidated. Cool. So how do all these changes that I've talked about, how does this affect the changes which Google is implementing? How are we future-proofing ourselves against it? So grouping match types together due to lack of variance already between match types, and they will definitely become more so in the future, eliminates having unnecessary double serving because they're the same, and then diminishing data, which we definitely don't want in the account. Embracing bums, broad unmodified, for those of you who joined recently within smart bidding context. and integrating those within the new phrase as well will achieve kind of performance and growth of your account, which you might have seen with BMM previously, but it'll be like that, but actually even better. I've seen some really positive results using bums, broad and modifieds, kind of on several different accounts. So please give them a shout, and I'm keen to see the results of the poll as well. So if we know our audience, then we know what those are looking for. So we group our similar keywords together, and we focus our efforts instead on individual manual bidding. We focus them on writing engaging headlines for RSAs. We focus on kind of creating new keywords. We focus them on creating new strategies, expansion, and so on. And then finally, data-dense campaigns and ad groups provides Google with the data to do the work, so we can focus on those more contextual tasks and get ourselves ready for the future. Cool. How does this safeguard against further changes? So a couple of other suggestions here. So DSA campaigns, very similar to BUM campaigns, but they can capture high intent keywords, which you might not have necessarily thought of. And you don't have to navigate all those changes in keyword match types, which are happening kind of as we speak, really. Automated strategies, we'll also start learning about which queries to optimize towards. So shop to query reports, so that 80% thing that I was talking about before, and keywords will have less impact on the account if you start using it now. And if we create rich first-party audiences to assess high intent prospecting, then we're in the right position for an ever-increasing contextual-based targeting, which I'm certain is the future of PPC. I don't think keywords will exist in 2 years. So embrace now. Cool. So we got our smart structure. How do we optimize a smart structure? And I'm running out of time because I'm so damn passionate about consolidation and data density that I could talk about this for hours. But how do we kind of optimize within a smart structure? So when we set it up, we use target CPA and ROAS, use the recommended target that Google gives you, or average performance over the last 30 days. If you don't have more than 15 conversions over the last 30 days, use maximize conversions, and then change to target CPA or target ROAS if necessary. And if you're using target impression share or max clicks, please God use a CPC limit, because it will inflate the CPC of your account if you don't do that. How do we optimize that? So if we want to make the campaign less aggressive, then we increase the target CPA. So we go from £10 to £20, and be less aggressive. And if we want it to be more aggressive, then we lower it from like £10 to £5, for example. Cool. And if budget increases, consider a move from max conversions in a limited budget campaign to target CPA and vice versa. So a couple of example scenarios here. Cool. Our scenario is non-branded campaigns are under a target CPA of £10. If we want to go kind of, if campaigns are achieving a less than target CPA, we want to move to a more lenient target CPA strategy. Because they're performing well, then we double our CPA, and it accepts that higher CPA as an acceptable outcome. And it will bid more aggressively. It obviously won't hit that higher CPA if it's not hitting the current CPA. CPA might increase, but on average, you'll get more conversions, and the average kind of conversion value of your account will improve. If it's vice versa and they're achieving higher than your target, then lower the CPA to limit the amount that they can bid, and you should increase the profitability of your account there. A couple of other quick ones. So seasonality trends, how do we optimize towards them? Basically, if you're using a conversion-based strategy like target CPA, target ROAS, you should be fine. Google takes these into account, actually. But if you're using things like maximize clicks or target impression share, keep an eye on your budgets and keep an eye on your max CPC. Again, use a CPC limit, please. I've been burned too many times by that myself. Finally, a short spike, for example, Black Friday. So this is an interesting one. If you're expecting conversion rate to double over a short period of time, so let's say go from 5% to 10%, then halve your expectation. So double your target CPA, because Google will then assume that that is an acceptable outcome. Your conversion rate is doubling, so you'll end up with the same CPA overall in the middle, but your conversion volume will probably likely double, because you're providing Google with more leniency, even when you're seeing a conversion rate increase on site as well. And then immediately after the event ends, put the target CPA kind of back to normal or more strict than before to reduce variance. Cool. And then finally, with 30 seconds to go before the Q&A, just generally reacting with an automated strategy. So if you need to halve or double your budget, consider switching your strategy to something that either maximizes within a constrained budget. So if you halve your budget strategy, or something more considered for growth. So if you're uncapping, then move towards target CPA and target impression share to ensure that you're not kind of inflating your CPCs later. And also just check your recommendations, because Google will tell you to either raise your budgets for upcoming traffic increases, Google's clever, or to adjust your ROAS targets because it believes you can get more value through maybe increasing your CPA targets and more aggressive, for example. Is how to structure your search campaign for success. So if you've got any questions, please shout now. I'm looking at the poll. I've had 3 whole votes. Thank you, guys. So we've had C, yes, and okay. If you've had okay results, I'd consider maybe looking back at the consolidation slides that I was talking about and getting the campaigns as dense as possible. If you've got dense campaigns, then Google's got more information to work with, and you'll probably see pretty good results with thumbs for the modified. So consider that, and also don't panic if you don't see immediate results within the first 2 days, because there needs to be a learning period for this sort of activity, and because it's a pretty broad and risky activity, set expectations for clients that you work with. Say in the first 2 days, you might see clicks increase quite a lot, you might see CPC go down quite a lot, but in the longer term, Google will converge towards a higher performance. And then the person who said not for a long time, give it a go, honestly. Make sure you're in the right strategy, use a target CPA or a target ROAS, give it a go, and give it a week or 2 weeks to test, and I'm sure if you've set your campaigns up in the right way, then you will see decent results. Cool. Are there any other questions? I've got some. Cool. So what do you think about Google Smart Bidding? Do you use it? What are the pros and cons, in your opinion? If you hadn't guessed, I'm pretty for it, to be honest. I think Google Smart Bidding is the future. If you're using manual bidding, again, you're fighting a losing battle. There's so many factors to every single search that's going on that it's impossible to stay on top of it. You're both making yourself more inefficient as a campaign, but you're also making it more time inefficient for yourself if you're spending every single day looking at manual cost per click increases or manual bid modifier increases. Google's going to be doing that for you. If you've got the right structure, especially, which is that consolidated structure, use it, use smart bidding. Google will learn, it has the data. You'll see good results. I would say those are the pros. Cons, I guess, learning periods can be a bit tricky. You've got a needy client who checks day on day, so you need to give it a week and you'll see awesome results. You will, but the first week might be a little bit rocky. If you're using like smart bidding on shopping and you really need to see top visibility for certain products, then you might want to go for maybe like a manual CPC and using search query filtered campaigns. That's a different story because I'm talking about search, but I would say if you're using search, there's very little downside to automation. Even if you're using an old campaign structure, which I would advise against, you'll still see better results if you use the right smart bidding structure for each campaign within that. I'll mark that as answered. I do use it. I think there's lots of pros. Cool. So Cindy says, hi, any advice to solve limited by budget without increasing budget? Yeah. So if you've got limited by budget, then bidding strategies such as maximize conversions, maximize conversion value, or maximize clicks will get you more money for your budget. So if you maximize budget, then you're losing target impression shares to budget. These strategies will make it so that you're getting your cost per click is falling quite a lot. You'll get more conversions for the budget which you have, and then you'll start to see that the target impression share that you're losing is no longer to budget, but it's to rank instead. If it's losing to rank, then eventually you might want to increase your budget and increase your bids and you'll get more. But if you really do have a fixed budget and it is limited, use a maximize strategy because your cost per clicks and your CPAs will both fall a lot because Google is going after that low-hanging fruit, and you're getting the very best of what you can possibly get for that particular budget. I can't stress how well maximize conversions works if your campaign is limited by budget, especially if you've got a lot of conversion data. So a really good quick win if you don't have the extra budget to utilize. Good, cool. I think that's it. So thanks all for coming. If you've got any questions, please hit me up on my Twitter, LinkedIn. Be really invasive. Send me some emails. If you put any of these into practice, I am very keen to talk about all of this, as I'm sure you've mentioned, as I'm sure you've realized. So thanks all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.